Alright everyone, welcome to the video. Here we are at my bench. I've got this piece of marbled leather that's going to be the outside sleeve slash pocket on this piece. I picked up the scratch all off of Amazon when I first started a couple years ago, and I actually didn't even realize that it was a scratch all because it came with a few other parts that get threaded into the end, kind of like one of those old screwdrivers with all the bits, but now this is its only function. So I'm just tracing around the template for the front piece. I cut these templates on my Cricut, but more about that in a future video. Now that we have the front piece cut out, I'm moving to this piece of black Sienna flat from Tandy leather. I've been sourcing much of my leather from Tandy. I have a couple pieces I bought from OA Leather and a few others from Rocky Mountain Leather Supply. I'm planning on moving into some higher quality leathers over the next few months to offer some alternatives on my shop. Here we are with both pieces cut out, and you'll notice the front piece is just a little larger than the back. Now, I'm using a 3/4 ounce leather here, so this may need to be adjusted if you're using thicker or thinner leather. However, I wouldn't suggest much different than this thickness. This is probably one of my favorite tools. It's used to cut the radius on your corners, and you can use the template provided, of course. I just like this as it helps me guarantee I get the same radius on each corner. And there's options there for different corner radiuses depending on my needs and the piece I'm working on. Now that we have the corners radiused, it's time to get my maker's mark on the front sleeve. If you haven't watched my short on this process, what I'm using here is just a cardboard template that the front sleeve fits into so that I can get the mark in the same place every single time. I am currently using binder clips, but I'm going to change that process in the future, and I'm actually looking at adding on just some little, I think they're like microscope clips that are going to go on there. Just they hold like the little slides on the microscope. Now, don't worry, that plate wasn't hot. There was a quick edit in there where I turned the machine on to heat it up just after I placed the leather under, so there's no chance that I was going to burn my hand by reaching under there. Just a few quick second press, and there we have it. It's a little hard to see with these marble pieces, but it's still important to have it on there. Now for the next part, I'll work on some new angles. My apologies for this. I do have two cameras now, and we'll be sure to get everything actually in frame. Here I'm actually placing the template for the front sleeve onto the inner sleeve so I can use my scratch awl to mark where it's going to be sitting. Then I'm going to use my rougher, which you'll see later in the video, to scratch the sides and prep them for glue up. With the edges all roughed up, it's time to lay down some glue. Now I'm using Echo Weld from Tandy Leather. It's a water-based contact glue that I really like. It's low VOC, has a really strong hold. At least I haven't had any pieces come apart over the past 2 years. I put the glue in these little bottles that I bought from Michael's just to make it easier to get a thin line of glue around the edge. Once the glue line is finished, we can move on to using a glue spreader to get it all the way around to the edges of the piece. will admit that I didn't really follow my true process in this one. Getting back into shooting for the channel had me thinking more about the angles and the shot process, if you can believe it. So as you can probably tell, some of these steps are a little in the wrong order, but here we are with my edger getting ready to just clean up the edges a little bit. Now that we have the edge on the top of the pockets rounded off, we're going to move to a little burnishing here. This step is the correct order, as you want to be sure to burnish the top edges of each piece at this point in the process. After the edge is burnished, I like to take this step a little further and burnish about the top ½ inch or so of the inside of each one of these pieces. It's just a nice finishing touch for the inside of the card holder. I can also tell it's nearly time to refill this bottle. This is the rougher tool that I mentioned earlier. I'm using it here just to rough up the sides along the edges where the burnishing was done, just to ensure that my glue is going to stick. Now that we have our glue on each of the areas we need it, we can move to piecing this together. We'll start by folding over the inner sleeve onto itself. Just take your time, try to make sure to line things up as close as possible to save on the sanding that you'll have to do for your edge finishing. Once that's in place, we can take the outer sleeve and fold it around the inner sleeve. This is where that little bit of extra width comes in. I won't lie, this didn't go together very well. Once again, precision on the piece while trying to frame it up, not exactly the easiest, and so I'm a little out of practice here. It'll get better, I promise. I did fix this off camera. With the piece glued and hammered, we can move to a little edge cleanup. I'm using 3 different grits of sandpaper here that I picked up at Princess Auto, 120, 180, and 320. I'm not 100% sure, but if you're in the US, you might be able to find the same thing at Harbor Freight. If not, just some regular sandpaper will do the trick. You want a fairly coarse grit here for the first 2 steps, unless you got your edges glued up clean, which case you can probably skip this step. This is why we need that clean edge. We move on to marking our stitch line with a wing divider. I'm using a 3mm spacing from the edge and work with 0.6mm tiger thread and 5mm diamond stitching chisels for the most part, but I have other thicknesses of threads and other chisels as well. It just depends on the project. Now you'll notice here that I use a 2-point chisel to mark around the radius of the corner and then go back to a 4-point chisel. There are multiple ways you can do this, however this is just the method I find that works best to get the holes lined up around my corners. With all of our holes marked and punched through, we can move to stitching. I'm still stuck using this crappy Amazon stitching pony, but it's done about 300 pieces to date, so I guess it's not all bad. I'm just waiting for AO Leather to get some Dream Factory ponies back in stock so I can pick one up. I'll get into my version of stitching lessons as well as how I finish my edges in a future video, along with a lot of other content here on the channel, but that's really all that's left to do for this one. Really hope you enjoyed the video and enjoy making the Sycamore card holder. Feel free to change the name of it to whatever suits your brand, and make sure to tag me in any posts on social media should you choose to download and use the template. If you enjoyed the video or just want to show your sort of appreciation for the free template, feel free to drop a like, or you can share the video. And if you want to see more of my leatherworking videos, make sure to subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.